Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update. First part thereof, I have done a breaking news update concerning the huge drone attacks from Ukraine onto Russia last night. I've already done that video today. Go and check that out. This is my normal hits and losses video to start the day off for the 17th of May 2024. Lots to go through. I'll try and race through it, expedite this information into your frontal lobes or whatever. So we have some incredibly high numbers again in a number of these categories. 1,410 personnel lost is a very high number that we have been used to for the last 4 or 5 days since the Russians attacked in another area from the north of Ukraine through into Kharkiv Oblast, and they might well be simmering, ready to go into Sumy from Kursk Oblast as well. But we see 18 tanks destroyed. That's another heavy day of tank losses. 14 APVs, that's dropped down. 38 artillery systems. That's a very high number of artillery systems lost, destroyed, damaged, abandoned, or captured. 1 multiple launch rocket system. 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems, depends what they are, but that might be a sore loss. And then we have 2 aircraft up there and 1 helicopter. Helicopter's an interesting one. I don't know whether that was the one that was supposedly hit recently in the eastern area, or whether that's from one of the strikes on Belbek. These numbers of aircraft and helicopters lost, it's quite difficult to get a handle on what's going on there. I think there were inaccuracies at the beginning of the war, so I think these are overinflated. But generally, they've been quite accurate going of recent times, and actually possibly undercounting them. So where you see satellite imagery from open source intelligence of, say, 14 aircraft being hit at Berdyansk, was it, and Luhansk airfields, actually very few were added to these lists. And so trying to work out what the rationale is for the general staff for adding figures here. And we understand, again, open source intelligence indicates that quite a few more aircraft have been lost in the strikes on Belbek than the Ukrainians have added to these lists. So they might well be undercounting. I don't know whether they're trying to overcompensate for, or undercompensate, if you like, for the much bigger numbers posted earlier on in the war. Who knows? 56 vehicles and fuel tanks, 7 pieces of special equipment. High numbers in particularly vehicles and fuel tanks category there. So some really high figures posted by the Ukrainians, showing that the Russians are being made to really work for the gains that they're making on the ground. Now, Andrew Petcha, we have 2 lists today for him because of the timing of when he gets them out and the timing when I release my videos. So this one from yesterday, 16th, you can see that the numbers are in favor of the Ukrainians at about a 2-to-1 loss ratio. Just huge numbers again, really huge numbers of equipment lost. And oops, don't know what's going on there. We'll have to do that one again. Control 0. Okay, see if we can get an expansion of the... No, it's not liking it at all. Right, okay. Let's just go down to here then and look through it on this way. Right, we have a decoy being destroyed, a radar decoy, so it's good that the Ukrainians put that to good use. Tank, okay, so actually we need to go to further up here. We have quite a few bits of artillery taken out. M777, Bogdana, 3 multiple launch rocket systems, another M777. So, you know, that's not good, although 2 of them are only damaged. Could be an S-300 strike or maybe shelling. And Lancet, again, look at the Lancet, the number of Lancet hits on some of these artillery pieces. Lancets are more likely to hit stuff further back because they have a greater range on them. So it's unsurprising that you have Lancets taking out a lot more artillery pieces than they are taking out things like APCs, IFVs and whatnot. But anyway, quite a few losses there for the Ukrainians in terms of artillery. Infantry fighting vehicles, 2 Bradleys damaged and a Marder destroyed. They are awaiting further Marders from Germany that are going to be coming from Rheinmetall. And then we have some M113s, YPR 765, and Senator MVP. In fact, quite a few M113s abandoned, destroyed, damaged, the whole range there. Some Cossack, MRAPs, and Max Pro, and then down to sort of 4-wheelers and civilian vehicles. But quite a few losses there for the Ukrainians, indicating that they are probably quite active with mechanized vehicles up in the Kharkiv area, because we wouldn't see this many losses in the established frontline areas. Like, we haven't seen that since the time of their counterattack last May, so a year ago. So I think the way that they are defending up in Kharkiv is they're bringing an awful lot of vehicles and equipment to the region. Russia are probably able to hit with a number of Lancets and other munitions and drones from within Russia, possibly somewhat protected. By the way, the US Pentagon has come out and confirmed that Ukraine can't use American weapons inside Russia, although there was some strategic ambiguity from Senator Antony Blinken, and that was really picked up. I did think people ran with that a bit too much with regard to the idea that the US had given permission for the Americans. I wasn't saying permission. I was talking about implicit allowance, or basically, yeah, it's. I just think it was the weakest form of giving permission. Actually, Pentagon's now come out and said no, you can't, which is absolutely insane. I'll have a bit of a whinge about that later. So we've got an air defense system for the Russians here, Strela 10. We've got a Zoopark 1 radar and a 92 N6E radar. That Zoopark 1 is worth a lot of money. So those three pieces of kit up at the top there are going to be really sore losses, and that could themselves overwhelm all of what the Ukrainians have lost in terms of monetary value. But it's not just about monetary value, because they aren't necessarily, building and replacing these. It's about the function they have, the value they have, and whether they are easily replaceable with other bits of kit. And that is the value of taking out the stuff that each side takes out. We've got a multiple launch rocket system in the artillery, a whole list of tanks, including T90M, which was previously listed as abandoned, now destroyed, and I think I've got the image, or I've got the video of that. You've got another garden shed getting taken out, so a lot of these adapted tanks seem to be more vulnerable now than they were when they first turned up. We've got a whole list of infantry fighting vehicles mainly damaged and destroyed there, so that's good news for the Ukrainians. BMP 1s, 2s and BTRs of different variations. And then we have a whole load of trucks, lots of Ural trucks, Desert Cross golf cart, some quads, and then a whole load of civilian vehicles, loads, pickups, all sorts there, and quite heavy numbers being destroyed for the Russians, as I pointed out before. The Ukrainians seem to do, but it's not just the sheer numbers here, but actually the type of damage that's being done, or indeed the destruction being done to the kit. And I think the Ukrainians do a better job of destroying Russian kit than the Russians do of destroying Ukrainian kits. Okay, then when we come to, although actually the Ukrainians lost quite a bit here, but we'll talk about that in a second. So now we're going to come to today's figures, but, as you can see here, it looks about a 2.5, maybe 3-1 Russian to Ukrainian losses. However, I think it's even better for the Ukrainians than that, because here I would not put, why is it not letting me expand the image today? That's being really irritating. Right, do that a different way. So let's look at the Ukrainian losses. And as you can see, the first, 7 of these are Starlinks. And as valuable as Starlinks are, and as relatively expensive they are, I guess, like compared to me buying a calculator, that is a sore loss for the Ukrainians. This is obviously a montage of a unit that's gone out to look for Starlinks. Fair enough. That is an issue, and it does tell us a story. I'm just not sure I'd put that on the same loss list as all the other equipment here. I say that often about drones, about UGVs, unmanned ground vehicles, and some of the larger aerial drones as well. I wouldn't put them on here. Andrew and his team do. They will have rationale for that. So I would personally take the first 7 off and then look at the ratio of losses. And I think, it looks a little bit better for the Ukrainians. I'm not trying to say that because it would be better for the Ukrainians. It's just that, I'm looking at things like tanks and whole, mobile radar systems and infantry fighting vehicles and whatnot. Anyway, there you go. See, so the Ukrainians have lost another Grad, another multiple launch rocket system, a couple of M777 howitzers, a few tanks, a few infantry fighting vehicles, including a destroyed CV-90. That's the Swedish provided one, which is going to be a bit of a sore loss. And then not really much else of huge value. And the Russians have lost, well, a bit of OSINT work on the planes taken out at Belbek, so that's 2 MiG-31s, a MiG-29 and Su-27. We'll come on to speak about that in a second. So they reckon 4 destroyed planes, and there are claims that actually there were others that were damaged. A Brem 1 recovery vehicle, and then we have a few artillery pieces, another tracked garden shed thrown in, a whole load of tanks, actually, really quite a lot of tanks, a lot of T-80 BVs. There's another T-90M destroyed there, abandoned, hit. No, that's an unknown cause, that one. And T-72, T-64s, T-62s. So a whole range of tanks there, including some of the modern variants thereof. And that, the tanks alone is enough to pretty much overcome the Ukrainian losses. So then if you're adding 4 planes on there, recovery vehicle, and then all the rest of the stuff, goodness me. Right, trucks, a bunch of those. Then a whole host of golf carts. It is Golf Armageddon in the occupied regions of Ukraine. And then after that, we have usual civilian vehicles, pickup trucks, loads, SUVs, whatnot. That is a very bad day at the office for the Russians, especially considering they've lost at least 4 planes. I would argue more than that. Okay, Ukrainian General Staff have stated that the situation in the town of Vovchansk is under control as of now since the beginning of the 16th of May. The losses of the enemy in the Kharkiv direction amounted to 160 occupants, so I think that's probably killed in this context, but may not be, in personnel, and 21 units of weapons and military equipment. So it's just a tot up of what they've lost. I think the Russians have started losing more in that direction. They had the ratio about just over. Well, it's 1-to-1, but the Ukrainians have lost more. Although I'd say, as we've seen here, I think the Ukrainians are losing more vehicles, so it'd be interesting to see what the overall ratio is now. Then going to Belbek, apparently another Russian aircraft, possibly a Su fighter, was destroyed in Belbek Air Base in the western aprons there. So these are called aprons, these bits, where you park the planes up. And actually, if you go back to what Andrew Perpetua has on his loss list, he has a Su-27 destroyed. So that's in agreement with what Andrew and his team have. Satellite pictures showing the Belbek airfield near Russian-occupied Sevastopol are now available. They show that 2 Russian airplanes, possibly MiG-31Ks, were successfully destroyed. The airplane type is a carrier for the Kh-47M2 Kinzhal missiles. Those are the daggers, the hypersonic missiles. Furthermore, an ammunition warehouse nearby was destroyed. Lots of people come out with different tottings up of what have been what has been destroyed at this airbase. 2 MiG-31s, Su-27 and a MiG-29, says PS01. High quality satellite images from Maxar show that. Also, an S-400 air defense system was completely destroyed, including the radar. This opened the way for the night drone attack on Sevastopol, exactly what I said this morning. And there may have been other damaged planes that were evacuated after the first attack, possibly after the second attack as well. Reported losses then, I mean, this is the biggest set of losses I've seen listed, so take all of these claims with a pinch of salt, but Ukraine Battle Map says over the last 2 days, 2 MiG-31 fighter jets were destroyed, 3 Su-27s were damaged, 1 S-400 92 N6E radar was destroyed, 2 S-400 launchers were destroyed, warehouse for fuel and lubricants, warehouse for MiG-31 and Su-30 missiles, and 13 Russian troops dead in those Belbek strikes. So, yeah, and I don't know if he's adding another fighter jet destroyed in this later reply to that, to his own analysis there. But you can see that it's fairly costly for the Russians. Now, there are so many videos coming out at the moment. Again, it's a very fertile time for OSINT video releases of destroyed equipment. Here's the T-90M being completely destroyed after it was abandoned. That was on the first Andrew Perpetua list, that one. and we have just randomly picking some Ukrainian FPV pilots from the 110th Assault Brigade attack and destroyed 2 Russian tanks in the Kursk region. Now, this wasn't completely random that I chose this, actually. It's because they are striking within Kursk, which is, I think, possibly ahead of an attack into Sumy. So if my geography is correct, then I think this is an important strike. Why would they have tanks milling around north of the border there unless they were going to use those tanks? Those tanks could otherwise much better be used on the front lines, as the Russians appear to be getting low on tanks. So that signifies, I think, that A, the Russians are going to attack into Sumy, and B, the Ukrainians are at least somewhat prepared for them or know it's going to happen. Then we have near Mariinka, Russians tried to break through Ukrainian defences. The 33rd Mechanized Brigade, they lost 2 tanks, 2 infantry fighting vehicles and personnel here. So I'll link these. I'm not going to link all the drone stuff because it's free. It's very easy to find the drone stuff on Twitter or online, but you can see and you only have so much space in the description, but I'll link all of these ones of the hits and losses. You can see that the Ukrainians are using artillery again. They're using cluster munition artillery shells. Look at the pockmarked field there. It's just absolutely incredible what this war has done to the landscape, and it just shows the sheer volume of shells that both sides need to use in order to keep going with their daily consumption. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about shell procurement in a second, but before we go on, it's obviously drones. Now, I've done that video talking about the 105 or so drones that the Ukrainians flew into Russia, hitting Sevastopol, hitting Novorossiysk, the Russian Black Sea Fleet port on the eastern coast of the Black Sea, and also Tuapse oil refinery. Yesterday, more footage came out of, and I did mention this in one of my videos, Tula being a Russian military enterprise being hit in Tula. This came out after we found out of some strikes into Russia with long distance drones. This was another one. Reportedly, the target attack was most likely the production facilities of the state-owned enterprise of the Russian defense complex Basalt. It is a key enterprise in Russia for the production of ammunition and supply of weapons for Russian ground forces, the Air Force and the Navy. So that's a really significant target. How much damage was done to that? If it has stopped production, I don't know. We have someone here, an Austrian retired colonel, saying, right, for 2 nights, back-to-back attacks wide. For 2 nights, this is Belbek. Ukraine launched massive attacks into Russian-held Belbek airfield and Crimea. Some have asked why hit the same place twice. Well worth a space on this. Here's why. For starters, it's completely in line with Ukraine's strategy, but there's more. I mean, it's fairly obvious why you'd hit it twice, but let's go through it. Post-attack number 1, Russia's most likely and arguably only course of action was rapid repair and resupply, as holding the base is critical. Abandoning Belbek is not an option. This suggests an interesting aspect to the overall war. While many may micro-assess the stagnant Eastern Front, a battle for Crimea is perhaps far more important. In other words, they would have been repairing that the next day because it's so critical, Belbek, and hitting it the second night in a row might well take out some of those repair vehicles and also set back the repairs themselves further. Number 2, while militaries can resupply and refit military hardware, tanks, aircraft and artillery from existing production lines, assets designed to rebuild, repair or refit combat engineering systems, combat engineering systems, are limited and hard to replace. Last night, many of these combat engineering systems were probably attempting to rapidly repair the airfield, and if so, there's a strong likelihood they are damaged or destroyed. If point 2 above is correct, then Russia has some challenges. Most airfields have limited combat engineering systems, and acquiring replacement ones takes time. This means Belbek Airfield is not only exposed, but its ability to provide ground-based air defense over the Crimean Peninsula is also degraded. In other words, when you have engineering vehicles taking away planes or fixing parts of the airfield or doing whatever those engineering vehicles do that might be bespoke to airfields, if you blow up them in a second attack on Belbek Airfield, then any further attack on Belbek Airfield means that they are less able to clear up the stuff and sort it out and get it back to working order. So a continued set of attacks on Belbek might be well reasoned, well justified, and that will leave the Russians in a really difficult position. Okay, so Are we perhaps seeing a new front open, expand in the war? It's a bit too early to say, but many senior US strategists for years, to include myself, have argued a key to the war is make Crimea untenable for Russia to operate and exist there. It's also why the Black Sea Fleet is now arguably rivaled by a small town yacht club. So the frustration of all this is that we knew this 2 years ago. We were calling for ATACMS, like I was, you were, for ATACMS to be given to Ukraine all that time ago. Because you know that when they use them, they'll be able to do stuff like this. Lo and behold, they've used them, there's been no escalation, and they've taken out Russia's ability to use Belbek airfields at the moment, and taken out at least 4 airframes, maybe a lot more, and air defense systems that then allows Ukraine to further attack into Crimea. Imagine this was done 2 years ago. What would the outlook have been for the Ukrainians over those 2 years after that? Like when they did the counter-attack in last May, and you've had helicopter bases hit in Berdyansk, at Luhansk, now Belbek and Jankoy, right? The Russian ability to defend their front lines with helicopters was a massive component of the success of repelling the Ukrainian counteroffensive. If you didn't have the helicopters doing that, then you would be relying on just the minefields and the ATGMs and artillery, right? But then you could see more HIMARS rockets or missiles being used, just the general 84-kilometer ones, your basic variant, you could use them to take out artillery pieces and so on and so forth. The counteroffensive could look different. But instead, it was this wait, and then give. And then go, oh yeah, you're really good at using them. And it didn't cause escalation. Just really, really frustrating. This has happened all throughout the war. F-16s, M777, HIMARS, Storm Shadows. Like everything just main battle tanks. Everything takes a long time and then eventually gets there. And then, oh look, Ukraine can use them really effectively. Who knew? Interesting tidbit from Sir He Flash, says John Ridge, in addition to GNSS jamming, so that's jamming of the Russian kind of GPS system, the Ukrainians are widely spoofing Russian one-way attack drones. That's to kind of, not just to stop them from working, but it spoofs them so they think they're somewhere else. So spoofing Russian one-way attack drones and cruise missiles. The objective is to spoof them into approaching Ukrainian air defense sites where they are engaged and destroyed. So you basically get them to attack where the Russians think they're attacking this Ukrainian target, right? The Ukrainians then spoof these systems on the drones or missiles to attack somewhere else, thinking it's that original place, and that somewhere else is actually right near air defenses. So you're just fooling them into flying near air defenses, and then you take them out of the sky with air defenses, and that appears to be happening more. Russia uses largely Chinese, cheaper and poorer quality radios. Signal usage is widespread. Ukrainian GNS electronic warfare messes with Shaheeds and missiles that use guidance and lead them to UA air defense positions so they can be destroyed, says Justin Case here. Very good name. Larger electronic warfare systems operate a few kilometers behind the front, but Sergei estimates that only 30% coverage of what is needed, so obviously they need a lot more. Because of regulations, bureaucracy, and small profit margins, trench-level electronic warfare lacks in a spectacular fashion, nowhere near what's needed. Due to decentralization and lack of standardization, there's chaos at the front with drone and electronic warfare usage, where random electronic warfare devices interfere with enemy drone monitoring and the launch of friendly drones. So it can also affect your own drone usage. West lacks up-to-date electronic warfare systems, and they're also very expensive, so Western help is limited in this regard. A lot of work's having to be done by the Ukrainian defense military industrial complex, because kind of they know more than there's no greater knowledge of what is needed in the modern battlefield arena than what the Ukrainians have. So there are some cases where the West has the advantage in technology and weaponry, and we can say, right, we can give you this, or we're not too happy with giving you this. And there are, but you know, we have better stuff than you do. And there are other examples where, like, oh, do you want to use this electronic warfare stuff that we've developed over the last 10 years? And Ukraine go, thank you very much. And they go, actually, it's not really fit for purpose because you haven't designed that with this in mind and that in mind that we are experiencing on the battlefield right now. Anyway, Sergei has sources in China, and based on what Russians order, can anticipate moves made in drone and electronic warfare. So interesting that the information is leaking out of China, whereby the Ukrainians can understand what the Russians are asking of China in this context, and then build things to work against that predictively. Russians have similar problems Ukraine has, but due to being a larger country, simply have more people trying to solve those problems. Interesting little thread there. Thank you very much. Right. Remains of Ukrainian naval drones, one equipped with the converted and probably coveted R-73 air-to-air missiles. So there are some images coming out over the last few days or last 24 hours of some of these Ukrainian drones. There were 2 nights of attacks of naval drones on Crimea. I have absolutely no idea of the outcome of these. I assume they probably have been repelled successfully by the Russians precisely because we have seen nothing. And if there had been greater success, you would have seen something probably by now. One of those might be the one that was taken out by that helicopter attack, because the drone, I don't know that the drone blew up, but it hit the drone, and the drone fired off the rocket, I think. But I don't remember the drone actually sinking, so that might be one of those. Who knows? And then, of course, there's all the videos that we have seen that I've shown you concerning the strikes on Russia and occupied Ukrainian territories that the Russians control, with the 105 drones sent over. So just really quickly, the Russians sent 20 drones, Shaheeds, into Ukraine. Ukraine shot them all down. Ukraine sent 105 drones last night in the biggest attack, which I think is a turning point in the war. And if the Russians say 105 drones were launched and they were all kind of shot down, you can assume that probably more were sent, and they weren't all shot down. In fact, they weren't all shot down, because we've seen plenty of video evidence to suggest that they weren't. There's an awful lot of video coming out to show these drones. Why does that keep auto playing? It's really frustrating. Let's just refresh the page. So lots of video footage coming out of attacks on Novorossiysk, Crimea, Belgorod, and Kursk. So a number of different regions attacked, but the main places I think were Crimea and essentially Novorossiysk and south into Tuapse, an oil depot there. Russian Ministry of Defense reported that 95 drones were shot down, or 105, depending on which source. They might have come out and later said more. 44 of them over Crimea, 51 over Kuban. I think that's Krasnodar, which is on the kind of right-hand side of the Black Sea. Novorossiysk was hit in a number of different ways. So this is where the Black Sea Fleet is at the moment. Sevastopol was also hit, which is where the Black Sea Fleet was in the third attack this week. Balaclava also being hit. I don't know too much of the details about Sevastopol, other than there's a lack of electricity there. Trolley buses aren't working, and I think traffic lights are still not working at the moment. They're trying to get it all up and running, but an electricity substation and pumping stations were disabled. So that's Sevastopol. Novorossiysk, on the Black Sea, where the Black Sea Fleet is now based, was hit in a number of different places. So there's an oil depot, another oil depot, a Mazutny terminal of the port of Novorossiysk, which, just to let you know where Novorossiysk is, so you got the port there, which is where the Black Sea Fleet is, and then an oil depot down in Tuapse was also hit, or refinery, actually, I think it was. So, okay, different claims of all sorts of stuff being hit. So the seaport itself of Novorossiysk was hit. We've got someone there saying it was blown up right in front of me. They're destroyed. They're attacking the port, etc., etc. A fuel oil terminal, a Transneft facility. Locals reporting more than 30 explosions. I imagine the air defense is probably fairly successful in Novorossiysk, because that is probably where they've got their best air defenses, given it's where the Black Sea Fleet is. But things certainly did get through. I'm not sure of any hits on military targets like the actual fleet itself, but there were an awful lot of other targets that were hit. There's an awful lot of video footage you can go and check out. I won't play it now, but you've got oil depots on fire. You've got mining facilities being hit. So a mining site, a metallurgy plant, Novoross Metal, cement factory at Cementi Zavod. So mining and cement all sorts of stuff being hit. Grain infrastructure being hit as well. This is a grain terminal here that was hit in Novorossiysk. I think it's the aftermath of it, some sort of, I presume that's bent metal and stuff there. No, I don't know how significant damage is there. And as you can see there, burning oil container, or one of those big oil depot bits of infrastructure. That's it, Novorossiysk. So, goodness me, it's just widespread. They blew up the port, the port. Widespread damage being done all over the shop. And then Tuapse was hit twice by these Luti twin-tailed drones that fly pretty briskly. It's about 150 kilometers an hour, as far as I remember, hitting the oil refinery there, that then going up in flames, and then another one hitting relative or very close to where that first hit took place. And I was saying in my previous video, I think that's a bit of a shame, because you end up hitting, this is indeed the video here, so first thing to note is that there's virtually no air defenses. There's a couple of, sounds like, a couple of guns shooting at them. I don't even think there might not even be air defense guns. Maybe small arms fire. And then this drone ends up hitting right next to where the fire already is. And I was saying earlier that it's a real shame there's so much other infrastructure there. It would have been much more effective had it hit another piece of infrastructure. But I guess they've got like their main target. And rather than sending 5 drones at different areas and then having 4 of those drones shot down, and one drone getting to maybe the fifth level target. So say you've got 1 to 5 areas you want to hit in descending order of like importance at that site. And you think, right, we're going to send 1 drone at each of those. And then the one that gets through hits the least important thing. You're thinking, oh, okay, yeah. What they might be doing is sending 5 drones at the most important target, and all of them to hit that. So if 4 of them get taken down, then at least 1 gets through and hits the most important thing. But then if 3 get through, they all hit the same thing, or very close to the same thing, which isn't as good as, number 1, 2, and 3 getting hit. But at least you're ensuring that the top level target gets taken out. Do you get my reasoning there? I don't know if that's what they're doing. So if they're only sending two drones at this, then sending them at the same point means that the most important point has a higher level of probability of being taken out. Anyway, point being, Tuapse oil refinery there has been targeted. So much is happening. It did happen overnight last night, and there's geolocations being done there. There's all sorts of footage coming out of things blowing up, which suggests that the Russians didn't shoot down the drones, especially since there's virtually no, certainly of the ones in the daytime, there's no evidence of any air defenses being used. So if they shot everything down, they did it through electronic warfare that you can't hear. But that doesn't seem to be true, because oil refineries have been hit, oil depots have been hit, cement infrastructure has been hit, so on and so forth. But also Belgorod, a gas station Belgorod was hit last night. I think that's like a petrol station, not gas refinery or anything. And other places might have been hit as well. I think there'll be an awful lot of information coming out as the day goes by. Right, okay. So, moving on to other bits and pieces for the first time. And the key there is that you will see this more often. This is hugely important. We are going to see Ukraine. They have already claimed that they've got production of Shahed attack type drone, like the Luti there, up to what Russia has. So they are producing at the same level as Russia. I would assume that they've gone beyond that now. I think that the Ukraine are doing a really good job of ramping up their production. They're also getting a lot of help from abroad. So I personally think that you are going to see Ukraine do more damage to Russia than Russia can do to Ukraine with drones, because I think Russia is less able to penetrate with drones now that the Ukrainians have a smaller country. It's still a big country, but the borders mean that you can only attack in certain places, and I think Ukraine have set up their air defenses so that they can take down Russian drones coming in and Russia don't seem to set up their air defense to protect against Ukrainian drones going out. So it appears that Ukraine has a better ability, and then once they're through any kind of initial defenses, like there's such a vast country that you can't hope to successfully take down those drones easily, because there's so many targets around a huge country. So I think we're going to move to a period of Russia getting absolutely hammered by Ukrainian drones, and Russia less able to hammer Ukraine with their drones, although they are better able to, they are well able to destroy infrastructure with certain missiles at the moment, and that those ballistic missiles, and that's a challenge for Ukraine. But certainly in the drone context, I think this is a very important period. This is an inflection point, I think, in the drone warfare. So we shall see. Right, this is a massive call. So for the first time in the war, Ukraine has enough artillery shells to fight against Russia. No brigades have shell shortages, says Zelensky. And actually, it's slightly more, it's slightly a bigger claim than that, actually. So he has said that for the first time since the start of the war, none of the brigades complain that there are no artillery projectiles, and this has been happening for the last 2 months. However, we still have a lot of work to do. The Czech initiative will go ahead. We are negotiating with all partners about money. That is not necessarily what you hear from the ground, though. That's what Zelensky said, and he's saying for 2 months that's been the case. I don't know if he means that they've had no shortages for 2 months, or this has been an ongoing process for 2 months, and now we're at this point where they have no shell shortages. French aid to Ukraine, for example, says, quoting from an article which talks to a unit that says, I have not fired a single full salvo, which is 40 rockets, in the year and a half that I've been deployed in Donbass. I fire 5 rockets at most, but it's rare. Most often it's a single rocket to have a psychological effect on a group of enemy infantry setting out to attack. We have no shortage of gun ammunition, but we lack everything else: drones, anti-drone jammers, shells, missiles. And what we observe is the deliveries continue to decrease and are more and more erratic. They certainly only cover the bare minimum. Now, I don't know when that was from, like the exact interview, but there might be a difference between what Zelensky says and the reality on the front lines, but it's definitely improving, and I think that's without doubt. Now, Commander-in-Chief General Syrski has said that Russia has expanded the zone of active hostilities by almost 70 kilometers, thus trying to force Ukraine to use an additional number of brigades from the reserve. Quote, the enemy launched an offensive well ahead of schedule, and it noticed that the overturning of our troops. However, they failed to break through our defenses. So although they've done that, they've failed to make any major breakthrough, but it might not be that was their intention. It could be that they were just wanting to stretch the Ukrainians, and if they broke through, then whoop-de-doo. But essentially stretching them by attacking in Kharkiv, attacking possibly in Sumy Oblast going forward, and then continuing to attack right along the length of the front line in the east and in the south. Putin has himself apparently said that Russian troops are advancing towards Kharkiv, but strictly according to the plan, creating a buffer zone with Russia's border regions. In other words, that they have no plans to capture Kharkiv, that it was all about a buffer zone, which would make more sense with the amount of troops they have. Mikhailo Rohoza here says, take this with a massive grain of pinch block of salt. You can bathe in brine if you want, but this is supposedly coming from a closed meeting with the Russian Security Council from Patrushev. He may have said this. We will not receive shale gas deposits in Kharkiv and Donetsk regions. We will not get such critical raw materials as lithium, cobalt, scandium, graphite, tantalum, niobium, and others which Ukraine is rich in. We will not get a source of bread and food where there are huge reserves, surplus bread, but it is difficult to take them immediately. There are still Bandera, i.e. Ukrainians. We must move at least 3 million companies from northern Hungary, Russia to Ukraine. So in other words, Hungary, Russia as in without food, not Hungary, the country. They are to place an army of 1.5 million in Ukraine closer to the EU borders so that they tremble. In the occupied territories, it is necessary to expand the use of shootings and post all this on social networks. Fear is our main weapon. Without this, it is impossible to build the Russia of the future. Without law enforcement agencies and other similar organizations with punitive functions, the Russian Federation cannot exist as an empire. Is what apparently was discussed. Now, the idea of we don't conquer Ukraine now, we'll lose everything. The idea is that they need to conquer the whole of Ukraine, because just the areas they have now isn't enough for the raw materials they need, the natural resources that they would like from Ukraine. The Donbass does get them natural resources, but there are other very rich areas that they would very much like to help themselves to, so on and so forth. So make of that what you will. In attacking in the Vovchansk area of Kharkiv Oblast, the Russians are apparently capturing lots of locals and have taken them to cellars, and there are reports of torturing, and there are reports of like a repeat of butchers being mentioned in conversation quite a lot. Anyway, Ukraine renews its claim that Russia has taken civilian hostages in Vovchansk. The Kharkiv Regional Police Chief Serhiy Bolvinov has told National TV News that around 40 mostly elderly people were captured while trying to evacuate and are being interrogated by the FSB in cellars. And Trentelenko says a now confirmation of butcher in Vovchansk has arrived. So Ukraine's Minister of Internal Affairs says, war translated, Ihor Klimenko states that terrorist formations of the so-called Russia are taking civilians hostage in the northeastern section of Vovchansk. Told them in basements, some of them were executed. We have already seen this many times when terrorists struggling to complete their objectives take it out on civilians. Clearly, Russian terrorist formations are following the example of their colleagues who organised similar events in Bucha and other towns of Ukraine and were later given state awards for these massacres. So you can check out what is the claims that are made by the Ukrainians here on the screen at the moment. I'm not going to read it out, but you get the point. I hope that the international community sit up and take, pay attention to this. I also, would like to make sure that it is verified if this has indeed, we need to know that it's definitely happened rather than go on initial claims. But it wouldn't surprise me at all, because we've seen it when the Russians have done this elsewhere. And it is not acceptable, and yet they still sit in the UN Security Council, even though they're not a member of the UN, as according to all that we went through, Talaria and myself, but mainly obviously Talaria, talking about from a legal point of view how the UN aren't in how Russia aren't even in the UN, the Russian Federation. USSR used to be, but not the Russian Federation. And yet it's still the case that no one has the guts to do anything about that and say, look, you're not in it, therefore you can't veto, therefore the UN could go in this direction rather than being held back by the Russian Federation. But go and check that live with Talaria and myself out in the live tab. Go and check out that chat. It was really, really interesting. But what are people like the UN doing with regard to these widespread war crimes that Russia have perpetrated and continue to do so? And it's over 2 years later, and we still have the situation we have in the UN. It's just nuts. Anyway, Ukrainian coal businessman and oligarch Kropotchov has been detained. He was detained today, according to Hromadska media outlets, and he's the owner of the Ukredoninvest group of companies with assets in the coal industry, machine building, construction, transportation, and media. The sources did not disclose the reasons for his detention, but that's another oligarch that has been detained there. Ukraine's civil service is suffering catastrophic shortage of people. So Ukraine's civil service is at both the state and local level is suffering from this catastrophic shortage of workers. Quote, we have had a catastrophic lack of specialists. Our goal is to attract qualified personnel and to be able to retain them through competitive wages, says someone at an online conference called 2 Years of War, Consequences and Prospects. So that will be further affected by the huge mobilization drive that Ukraine are going to go through. And it's rather like we've seen in Russia. There will be a labor shortage that will lead to a wage increase that will lead to inflation. This is something Ukraine have to try to manage as effectively as possible. It's going to be a massive challenge for the Ukraine, economic challenge for Ukraine. Mobilization is completely necessary. They need boots on the ground to fight in a war, but it will have tremendously negative effects on the economy. And it's going to be an absolutely massive challenge for the Ukrainians to overcome. Last thing I'm going to say, because it's been a big one, is that, do we have 4 different Putins? I don't know. They certainly do look like there's some different ears on show there. I know ears continue to grow as you get older, but some of these ears do look just at least a little bit different. See, that ear goes up in that angle and then straight and then round, and it doesn't do that here, but is that as a result of the angle? And the lobes look completely different there to me. I'm not sure that's the same Putin. And as I've said before, there's one Putin, the older Putin, the Putin that was going to conferences like 20 years ago. I swear it's just a different person. Like, to me, it is very much the case that there is at least two. There are at least 2 Putins, and more claims going on here. That lobe is different to that lobe for sure. It's a little bit more similar to that lobe, but still. There are differences. Let me know what you think. I'll leave that on the screen for your delectation. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. It's going to be a crazy new day of news today, I bet. Speak soon.